The Ukrainian front lines are probably among the most heavily mined areas since the Second World War. It is very difficult to advance main battle tanks through this terrain, which has approximately 2 million landmines. For this reason, Russian tanks have great problems in reaching the interior of Ukraine. Another obstacle for Russian tanks, which are able to pass through mined areas, is unmanned aerial vehicles. Reconnaissance, surveillance, and kamikaze drones of the Ukrainian army are one of the biggest nightmares of Russian tanks. Artificial intelligence applications used by the Ukrainians, which can instantly detect the types, positions, deployment centers, and routes of Russian tanks and armored vehicles, are also among the resources that make it almost impossible to advance on the front lines. Maybe Kyiv still hasn't fallen thanks to all this military equipment and vehicles. Also, the anti-tank missiles provided by the West to Ukraine. What about the Russian tanks? What happened to them? How many Russian tanks were knocked out of the war by Ukrainian landmines, drones, and artificial intelligence applications? Today we will discuss this important topic. Before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like us so that you can stay up to date with our content. Oryx puts Russian tank losses since the beginning of the war at 3,601, of which destroyed 2,534, damaged 157, abandoned 377, captured 533. Of course, this number is likely to be much higher. Ukrainian official sources claim over 9,500 Russian tank casualties. The figure given by Oryx is only the confirmed Russian tank losses. There are unclear reports on Russian tank stocks before the beginning of the occupation. There are reports of at least 13,400 Russian tanks, but there are also reports of 17,500 Russian tanks. Of course, this includes 60-year-old tanks in stock. Oryx data confirms that more than 25% of Russian tanks have been lost, while Ukraine claims that more than half of them have been neutralized. These casualty figures are a cause for concern for Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin. After these heavy losses, the Russians were even hesitant to put their most trusted T-14 Armata tank on the battlefield. The main problem for Russian tanks is the effectiveness of Ukraine's defense capabilities. The NATO-supplied Javelin anti-tank missile, for example, has proven particularly capable of defeating Russian tanks, as have drones and mines. In general, Ukrainians have mastered that low-tech, simple tools can be used to dismantle expensive and sophisticated tanks. Thanks to such equipment, Russia's tank attrition rates never showed any signs of slowing down. Together with sabotage teams, the Ukrainians skillfully laid landmines along the routes along which the Russian army's tank convoys passed. Russian T-90, T-80, and many other main battle tanks were blown up along these routes. The Russians usually lost their main battle tanks on the connecting routes from Kursk to Sumy and from Belgorod to Kharkiv. Russia's shortcoming in this regard was the inefficiency of its mine-sweeping teams. Russia tried to improve itself and deployed special teams to protect its tanks from mines planted by Ukraine on the war fronts. However, as we mentioned, the drones and anti-tank missiles in the hands of the Ukrainians ensured that the Russian mine-sweeping efforts were insufficient. This has created more important problems for the Russians. The drones, which cost very little, hunted Russian tanks worth millions of dollars, leaving Putin in a difficult situation. Likewise, Ukrainian anti-tank missiles became the killers of Russian tanks. The Ukrainians also created a new problem for Russian main battle tanks by combining drones with anti-tank mines. In this system, an anti-tank mine placed on a drone could go to a center, a deployment area where Russian tanks were located, and cause serious damage to these armored vehicles weighing tons. By directing and commanding this system with artificial intelligence applications, the Ukrainians were able to destroy a large number of Russian tanks in a single day. With all these military resources the Ukrainians had, the Russians lost a record number of tanks in just one day. Russia again holds the one-day record with 20 main battle tank casualties. Such losses brought Soviet tanks that had been in storage out of retirement. Because the Russian army's tank losses have outpaced the production of the new T-72 and T-90 models, Putin has been forced to rely on the old T-62. This setback was characterized as a transition from the modern T-72s, T-80s, and T-90s with thicker armor to the older T-62s with thinner armor. As the war continues and older tanks come out of storage, the success rate of Russian tanks is likely to decline. It is obvious that the Russian army, which will not be able to make sufficient use of the T-90Ms, once described by Vladimir Putin as the best tank in the world, can only do so much with the T-62s. So how many of the T-90s that forced Russia to use the T-62s have been destroyed in total? How did the Ukrainians manage this? The open-source research project Oryx has shared an important assessment. According to the assessment, more than 100 T-90 tanks are out of action, damaged, abandoned, or captured on Ukrainian battlefields. We have already mentioned Ukrainian mines, anti-tank missiles, drones, and artificial intelligence applications as destroyers of Russian T-90 tanks. Of course, we should not overlook the Western monsters used by the Ukrainians against the T-90 and other new Russian main battle tanks. So what is the best Western main battle tank used by the Ukrainians that has left Russia facing tank losses and tank shortages in ground battles? Was it the US M1 Abrams or the Leopard tanks sent by Germany and Ukraine's other allies that defeated Russia? First, let's take a look at the types of Western tanks Ukraine has, and how many of each type Ukraine has in total. Germany supplied 88 Leopard 1A5s and 18 Leopard 2A6s to the Ukrainian army. Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands have delivered over 200 Leopard tanks to Kiev. The Western Consortium also donated over 158 Leopard 2s to Ukraine. The United Kingdom sent 14 Challenger 2 main battle tanks to Ukraine. The US and Australia have provided 80 M1 Abrams tanks to bolster Kiev's ground forces. Of all these tanks, it was the US M1 Abrams sent to Ukraine that caused the biggest problems for Russia's new and modern tanks, such as the T-80 and T-90. Even a Ukrainian M1 Abrams commander sounded confident enough to suggest that the American tank of this type was better than Russia's best tanks in the war. The M1 Abrams tanks managed to wrest this reputation away from the T-90s. A closer look at the characteristics of these tanks makes it clear that Russia's T-90 tanks have lost their competitive edge. The Abrams is a formidable main battle tank used by the US Army. It weighs around 68 tons and has advanced armor, firepower, and mobility. Among the primary weapons of these tanks is the 120mm cannon shell, which can fire various types of ammunition, increasing its effectiveness against armored targets. Of the 40 shells, 34 are located in the turret hull and 6 in the rear hull box. With a crew of 4, this monster tank incorporates advanced technologies such as thermal imaging, computerized fire control systems, and reactive armor to increase battlefield resilience. The tank's commander's hatch is equipped with a standard 12.7mm Browning M2 HB machine gun, which can be traversed through 360 degrees. This weapon has reinforced and manual controls for traverse and manual controls for elevation. This machine gun has electric power rotation and can be aimed and fired from inside the turret. 6 smoke grenade dischargers are mounted on each side of the turret. In addition to the smoke grenade dischargers, the M1A1 also has an engine-powered smoke-laying system. The hull and turret of the M1 Abrams are based on Chobham armor developed in the United Kingdom. This armor provides protection against ATGWs and other battlefield weapons. The speed of this tank is also very good. The M1 Abrams is faster as it has a top speed of 72 kilometers compared to the T-90's top speed of 60 kilometers. This higher speed can be crucial for rapid redeployment or advances through enemy lines. The Abrams engine is also much more powerful than the T-90's. The T-90's 2A46M can penetrate an Abrams, but only effectively from about 500 meters. The Abrams, on the other hand, gives the T-90 tank little chance on the battlefield. While the T-90 can fire anti-tank missiles from its cannon, the M1 Abrams tanks are much more dangerous, firing armor-piercing fin-stabilized projectiles from its 120mm gun. As for the T-72 model tanks in the Russian army, the Leopard 2s are the most threatening tanks in the Ukrainian army's inventory. Leopard 2s have composite armor consisting of layers of steel, ceramic, and plastic, providing excellent protection against kinetic and chemical projectiles, while some variants are equipped with additional reactive armor and active protection systems. T-72s usually have steel armor with some composite materials in later variants. The armor of the T-72 is effective, but it is considered less advanced than the Leopard 2, especially in terms of protection against modern anti-tank weapons. So in this regard, the Leopard 2s are a step ahead. The Leopard 2s are equipped with a 120mm smooth-barreled gun, which has a significant advantage in terms of range and accuracy. The Leopard 2 can also fire advanced ammunition, including programmable projectiles. The T-72s, on the other hand, are equipped with a 125mm smoothbore cannon capable of firing a variety of munitions, including guided missiles. While effective, the T-72 tanks are generally no match for the Leopard 2 in terms of fire control systems and accuracy. On the other hand, the Leopard 2, known for its excellent mobility, has a powerful engine that provides high speed and agility on various terrains. The weight of this tank is well balanced for maneuverability. The T-72 is lighter than the Leopard 2, which can increase its mobility in certain environments. However, the design of the T-72 prioritizes compactness over speed and agility. In this regard, we can see that the Leopard 2 tanks are ahead, giving Ukraine significant advantages in land warfare. In other words, the Leopard 2 is generally superior to the T-72 in terms of protection, firepower, and technology. One of the beasts of war that caused Russia the most trouble in terms of tanks was the Challenger 2s, supplied by the United Kingdom to Ukraine. We have repeatedly witnessed what a small number of Challenger 2 tanks can do in the hands of Ukrainian forces. On the move, Challenger tanks were able to cause problems, even for powerful tanks of the Russian army, such as the T-90. Despite the technological differences between all other types of Ukrainian tanks, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to destroy or capture at least 50 Russian T-90s. The contribution of Challenger 2 tanks to this success is thought to be considerable. The Challenger 2 is a third-generation main battle tank, the same generation as the Russian T-80 and T-90 tanks. The Challenger 2's armor is called Chobham armor, or Dorchester armor, and is considered among the best in the world. Although the composition of these British monsters is top secret, it is about twice as strong as steel and can reportedly withstand a direct hit from a Russian T-72. The Challenger 2 weighs 46 tons, significantly heavier than the T-48, which weighs between 90 and 70 tons. The T-90 is significantly smaller than the Challenger 2. The Challenger 2's maximum road speed is said to be about 58 kilometers per hour and about 40 kilometers off-road. The maximum speed of the T-90 is said to be about 59 kilometers on the road and 45 kilometers per hour off-road. Leaving aside the speed characteristics, more armor can be added to the Challenger 2s during the war with explosive reactive armor kits, as well as additional stick armor. This feature makes these British tanks much more advantageous against Russian T-90s. The Challenger 2 is equipped with the rifled Royal Ordnance L30 120mm main gun, which can deliver main gun ammunition to a range of about 4 kilometers. The Challenger 2 can carry 49 rounds of main gun ammunition and white phosphorus smoke ammunition, a mix of high-explosive crushing warhead rounds, and armor-piercing fin-fixed throwing sabot rounds. The weapon can also fire high-explosive crushing warhead rounds and armor-piercing fin-fixed throwing sabot rounds. The high-explosive crushing warhead rounds have a much longer range of up to 8.04 kilometers and are very effective against buildings and thinner-coated vehicles. The Challenger's secondary armament consists of 2 7.62mm machine guns, one mounted on the same axis as the main weapon, and the other mounted on the roof of the vehicle. With all these features, the Challenger 2 tanks sent by the UK can provide superiority over all tanks used by the Russian army on the battlefield, including the T-90 type. The only problem is that the UK sent only 14 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine, and some of these tanks were out of action. In the absence of Challenger tanks, the Stridsvan 122 tanks, which are called road wagons made of solid steel, which Sweden provided to Ukraine, come into play. The Sterv 122 is designed to fight in Swedish conditions, including densely forested areas and urban terrain. This makes the Starv 122s significantly stronger against Russian tanks. The Sturvs are equipped with heavily reinforced armor to protect against portable anti-tank weapons. This armor is made of solid Swedish steel. This makes these Starv 122s stronger against important tanks such as the Russian T-80 and T-90. In addition, the Swedish-made STRV 122s are capable of penetrating water up to 1.4 meters deep. This is one of the biggest problems for Russian tanks on the front lines in southern Ukraine. The ability to lock on to multiple targets simultaneously allows the tank to fight multiple enemy vehicles without the need to manually re-aim the gun after each shot. Thanks to this feature, STRV 122s can destroy both a T-90 and a T-80 at the same time. In fact, it is the Bradleys, Javelins, and JDAMs that the T-90s have to worry about, all designed to kill Russian MBTs. But because of all these characteristics, the Swedish STRV 122s are particularly known as the killers of the T-90s of the Russian army. As we can see, all these Western tanks that we talked about in our video have given Russia an incredible shock in terms of ground warfare. M1 Abrams, Leopards, Challenger 2s, and STRV 122 main battle tanks have destroyed numerous T-54, T-62, T-64, T-72, and T-80 tank types, including Russia's most modern and new T-90s. Russia did not even get a chance to use its T-14 Armata tanks in the war. After these heavy losses, the main focus shifted entirely to the issue of how many tanks Russia had left. In 2022, the International Institute for Strategic Studies estimated that Russia had about 18,000 tanks. According to 2023 reports, the Russian army had about 2,000 tanks in service and up to 5,000 in storage. However, the report only took into account newer models, including the T-62, which was first introduced in the early 1960s. Russia not only had hundreds of T-54s and 55s in storage, but was also using them on the front line in Ukraine. Interestingly, in 2022, Military Balance stated that Russia had up to 13,700 tanks in storage, but even then, it did not count the T-54s and 55s. The Institute Action Resilience calculated that Russia had 55-38 tanks stored in the open air, and therefore visible via satellite, of which the Institute was able to identify 4,347 by type. According to the report, these storage facilities also have areas that can accommodate an estimated 1960 vehicles. Taking into account that some of these warehouses are not yet fully stocked with tanks, Russia is estimated to have at most 7,000 tanks. However, after recent losses during the war, it is more likely that this number will be around 6,000 by 2024 when we reach the present day. 3/4 of the tanks identified were built before 1980. The situation with the T-64s is less clear, as the Institute Action Reliance said it excluded them from the count because the lack of necessary spare parts made them unfit for service. It also removed the T-90s, although it is likely that they were stored in tank depots. Perhaps these tanks were counted along with the T-72s. The breakdown of where the various types of Russian tanks are located in relation to military districts is also interesting. In the Western Military District bordering Ukraine, in addition to the T-72s, there are the more modern T-80U UE-1s and T-ATBVs, T-80UDs. The central region has remnants of older T-72s and T-64s. The Eastern Military District has some T-80s, most of Russia's T-62s and T-54s and 55s. In addition to the deployment of Russia's tanks, we should also pay attention to the ability to repair these vehicles. There are currently 10 major military equipment repair facilities across the country, 3 of which are used specifically for tank repair. Also, let's not forget the Omsk Transmash plant in southwestern Russia. This factory used to produce T-80s. Now it repairs and modernizes them. Institute Action Reliance estimates that the tank repair plants in Russia are working much slower than Russian propaganda suggests. The 103rd Armored Tank Repair Plant in Russia's Transbaikal Oblast claims to repair an average of 22 or 23 T-62s per month, while ARI claims the plant can repair only 8 per month. The Russian Army received 2022 T-2022 T-623s from repairs at the beginning of March 2023, after starting repairs in October 40th. The 61st Armored Repair Plant in St. Petersburg repairs 30 to 60 tanks a year. In addition, the 163rd Armored Repair Plant in Krasnodar Krai repaired 2021 T-24 tanks and 72 BMP-100 tanks in 2012, implementing previously signed contracts. The state of repair at Omsk Transmash is highlighted by satellite images. At this facility, 100 tanks were awaiting repair in November 2022. In May 2023, the repair rate at the plant almost doubled. While the repair time for a tank stored in a warehouse depends on how well it is maintained, tanks in poor condition can take 3 to 4 months each, and other machinery may need to be broken down for parts. Due to these variables, Russia has also been severely affected in terms of tank repair. While the Russian tank company Uralvagonzavod modernized up to 300 tanks during its peak period between 2011 and 2021. After the full-scale occupation, this number dropped to 120 per year. When it then shifted its focus to the production of T-90Ms, an improved version of the T-90 tank, the company's modernization rate dropped to almost zero. Tank production shortfalls also pose major problems for Russia. Institute Action Reliance estimates that Russia can produce about 390 tanks a year. This number includes those being modernized or restored in tank depots. This contradicts Russian sources who claim that the country will produce 700-800 tanks in 2022 and 1,500 in 2023. Russia's tank production quality is also declining due to sanctions. Russia is unable to produce its national tanks, modernize damaged ones, or even fundamentally repair them, all the while facing the wrath of Ukrainian drones, mines, and anti-tank missiles, as well as Western main battle tanks. While the Ukrainian army is constantly reinforcing its inventory with powerful tanks such as the M1 Abrams, Leopard, Challenger, and STRV-122, Russia is forced to lose a large number of T-54, T-62, T-62, T-64, T-72A, and Ural, T-80 tanks, especially T-90s. As the war has become intensely tank clashing, Kiev seems to have an incredible advantage over Moscow in this regard. If the Ukrainian armed forces maintain the same success in using landmines, anti-tank missiles, drones, and artificial intelligence applications, and if the West continues to provide Kiev with military vehicles and equipment, we may not see a single Russian tank on the battlefronts. Of course, all these tanks are very difficult to destroy, but Russia may be discouraged from deploying its main battle tanks on the battlefronts because of these Ukrainian deterrents. Such a situation could spell the end of ground warfare. Thank you for watching us.